Because of the redevelopment that's happened around us, we get this large density of Latino residents here in this neighborhood. Not because it's the desirable neighborhood to live, but because they just can't afford to be elsewhere. So there's definitely been displacement and gentrification. There was definitely this conversation about planning on the West 25th corridor. And nobody from the Latino community really participating, not the residents, not the leadership. So I just asked the question, like, why aren't we at the table? And by the way, do you know that this neighborhood has the largest density of Latino residents in the state of Ohio? And so everybody was like, oh, yeah, you know, it's an open meeting, you just never got the memo kind of deal. They said, come to the next meeting, be a part of it. So I brought my gang of leaders and community folks to be part of that process, and others that started even before I did. And we injected ourselves in that planning process. So we went from not being a point of discussion to being a note of priority. So we needed to get the community excited, but how do you excite a community that's been so disenfranchised, that's been so disengaged, that nobody's ever asked them, what do you need, what do you want, what's your vision for this community? So we got turned down, we failed, had setbacks, had to start over at times. In anybody's case, that's always the distinguishing factor, the late Nipsey Hussle. Thank you. So first of all, welcome to Clark Fulton and Tremont, because we're right on the border. But for the sake of this conversation today, we're going to call it the Clark Fulton La Villa Hispana neighborhood. All right, so we're going to roll with that. If you can say Villa Hispana, if you can't roll your eyes, R's, that's okay, not a requirement. Hispanic Village will do. So thank you for having me here. I do want to talk a little bit or give you some perspective of what I do, like what I get paid to do. On the corner of West 25th and Clark, there's an organization called the Northeast Ohio Hispanic Center for Economic Development, very long. And I have the pleasure to be the executive director there. We do economic development in a very kind of hyper-local way. We have three ways in which we do that. We have a traditional chamber of commerce, so the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce lives within our organization. We have a small business development center. Small business development centers are a national program. We receive funding from SBA. There's 3 SBDCs in the city of Cleveland. So it's us, the Urban League, and Cleveland State University, provide free technical assistance and coaching to entrepreneurs regardless on what phase of your business you're in. So I know that there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience. If you are not connected to an SBDC, please do, and definitely tap into our resources because they are completely free. And then our third line of work, and wasn't necessarily intentional, is the work that we're doing around community development. It's been more so a response to community need and a lot of the work that I'll talk to you guys about today. So getting into it, I probably should tell you first that I grew up in this neighborhood. I grew up on West 30th and Clark. West 30th and Clark is still not cool. It definitely was not cool when I was growing up. It's literally down the street from Lincoln West High School. I'm a Lincoln West High School graduate and super proud of that. And just last week, I was giving a neighborhood tour to someone, and he was really a person in the media, and he was really interested about where I grew up. And like Tom, we never talk about ourselves, right? We talk about the work and the project and the people that we represent, but never talk about us. And so he said, but where did you live, and what was your house? And I'm like, yeah, but the Mercado's going to go here, and Placita's here, and this is what we're doing. And we were standing on an alley on West 25th, right across the street from a site that we're getting ready to redevelop. And I looked to the right, and you could see the house that I grew up in. And so I'm like, oh, there's the house. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah, that's it. We didn't even plan it that way. My mom and I rented a second-floor apartment, and it had a big porch. And I remember just sitting on that porch in the summers, because there wasn't a whole lot of things to do in this neighborhood at the time, dreaming and just thinking about what I would do and having big dreams. But none of the dreams that I had did I think at the time would bring me right to where I started, right? So now I'm like, oh my gosh, I sat on that porch and here I am, 20 plus years later. So definitely a lesson to me on how life comes full circle. Sometimes we don't choose our paths choose us. So that's all I'm gonna say about me. We're gonna move on to the actual work. So the work around La Villa Hispana, we know that the near west side of Cleveland has experienced a ton of cool neighborhoods, right? We all go to Tremont, Ohio City, Detroit Shoreway, and it's been great development for some, not all. And I love all of the neighborhoods, and I go to all of them. But the reality is that they haven't really been able to capture everyone or really include all of the residents within the fabric of their work. Clark Fulton is the next neighborhood for redevelopment. There's a lot of attention on the Clark Fulton neighborhood around the West 25th corridor. West 25th is about 2.8 miles long. The north side of West 25th is Ohio City. The anchor there is the West Side Market, which has about 1.2 million visitors a year. And then the south side is Old Brooklyn, another neighborhood that's definitely experiencing great revitalization, and the Metro Park Zoo is there, 3 million visitors a year. We are in the central part of that corridor, and folks just come and go. There's really nothing attractive about the neighborhood or not a reason to stop. At the same time, because of the redevelopment that's happened around us, we get this large density of Latino residents here in this neighborhood. Not because it's the desirable neighborhood to live, but because they just can't afford to be elsewhere. So there's definitely been displacement and gentrification. So with the development of Clark Fulton and getting all of this attention and studies around city planning, planning was happening with or without us, right? And so I had just became the executive director. I had a lot to learn, but there was definitely this conversation about planning on the West 25th corridor. And nobody from the Latino community really participating, not the residents, not the leadership. So I just asked the question, like, why aren't we at the table? And by the way, do you know that this neighborhood has the largest density of Latino residents in the state of Ohio? And so everybody was like, oh, yeah, you know, it's an open meeting, you just never got the memo kind of deal. So credit to the leadership. They said, come to the next meeting, be a part of it. So I brought my gang of leaders and community folks to be part of that process and others that started even before I did. And we injected ourselves in that planning process. So we went from not being a point of discussion to being a node of priority. So the neighborhood or the corner of West 25th and Clark being the node of priority for the transit-oriented study around West 25th. So that was our first win. The concept of La Villa Hispana is not new. It's over 3 decades, so a lot of the Latino community and the leadership that was here way before I was were trying to develop, first it was like a residential housing project, then it was a strip mall kind of concept, but for many reasons, it just never took off. You know, economics, leadership, I don't know. So when we finally were able to become part of this planning process, we just called it La Villa Hispana because we just dusted off, you know, the name and ran with it. So there was not a whole lot of intentionality at this point, but that's all we had. Once we got the attention of the city and the leadership, we went back to the community because we needed to define it. What does La Villa Hispana mean to the residents of this neighborhood, to the leadership, to the folks that grew up here, and really identified it in 3 ways. If neighborhood development and investment is going to happen in this neighborhood, it needed to be led by the people and for the people of this neighborhood. That the biggest asset of a neighborhood are the residents. Excuse me. The biggest asset of the neighborhood is the residents that live here. And so what happens when you think about community development from the bottom up? What happens when you let people come up with their own solutions or tell us what they really need? And so that's really been the premise in which we've been doing the work around La Villa Hispana. Community engagement, again, the concept of starting with people, residents, the leadership. We have solid Latino-based organizations that are doing the good work, and the faith-based community, right? We understand the value of faith and their role in community engagement and really being able to be a pathway to that. The second of it was arts and culture. We're people of color, of music, of food, and so how do we incorporate that in the neighborhood? We knew that that needed to really show up. Cleveland is a very, very gray place. Our buildings are gray and they match the sky most of the time of the end of the year. And so we can't have a gray neighborhood. We're a Latino community, right? You would expect much more than that. And so arts and culture is a big part of the work that you will be seeing in the next coming years. And then lastly, economic development. Like how do you create a vibrant retail district in this neighborhood, but also how do you address some fundamental needs? We're in a food desert. When you add the element of culturally appropriate products, right? So if I wanted to make sofrito, which is a base for most Latino meals, I would need to go to 3 different stores to get my peppers, to get my ajíes, to get this, to get that. 27% of the residents in this neighborhood don't own a vehicle. So we don't have a grocery store, and much less being able to get culturally appropriate products just to make a meal, right? So some very fundamental challenges for our community. On top of like low education rates, houses with lead, all of the chronic conditions, issues that our community face. So that needed to be part of the strategy, along with economic development and investment and so forth. And so my organization specifically focused on the economic development piece. While we were doing this planning process, planning is not sexy, it's not fun. I can't give live feeds on what's happening, right? Because I don't think anybody would pay attention. So we needed to get the community excited, but how do you excite a community that's been so disenfranchised, that's been so disengaged, that nobody's ever asked them, what do you need? What do you want? What's your vision for this community? And so we tagged on to the concept of open air markets, right? We're like, oh, okay, everybody does this. Let's do one in our community. And that's where La Placita was born. 5 summers ago, we started a small festival right outside of our parking lot on West 25th and Clark in the US Bank building. Uneven floors, it's not a desirable place. We also learned that there's no green space, specifically on Clark Avenue. A study was done on the Clark Avenue repavement project that was being conducted by the CDC. And the only green space was a cemetery on West 41st and Clark, right? So definitely challenges around space, green space, and just safety. So we started a placita. That's all we had, a parking lot. We rented tents from Home Depot. Most of them got rained on. People didn't come, right? It was new. It was a complete disaster, honestly. But we kept doing it. And we came back every year, and every year we grew a little bit. And last year we celebrated the fifth, we'll be celebrating the 5th season this year, but last year we had 8,500 visitors through a 3-year run of La Placita. Now we hire somebody to put up tents and do all that fancy work, run electrical. So I definitely welcome you to my neighborhood around the summer. It'll be the 3rd, this is my shameless plug, the 3rd Saturday of each month in June, July, and August, 1 to 10. Good music, good food. So moving forward, Placita was great. Clark Avenue is saturated with fast food restaurants, dollar stores, and auto parts, right? Very typical of a lot of our urban, underdeveloped neighborhoods. The West 25th has an abundance of abandoned warehouse buildings or underutilized old manufacturing buildings. And so how do we start new businesses, right? Like, what do I do with this? Was really our true problem. And I was able to go to a couple places and try to figure out how other cities was doing it. And I ended up in Minneapolis, walked into a market that was done by immigrant business owners. The city had helped them with the building. They had a Latina councilwoman that helped support the efforts. And you walked in and it was super overwhelming, right? Like I walked in through a Mexican bakery and there was just colors and food and people and it was loud. Got past that portion of it. And there were tiny little kiosks of food. So you had empanadas, you had your tacos, you had your smoothies, then you had a specialty grocer, you had a flower shop, jewelry store, a little food area. And that was my aha moment. I'm like, okay, we could do this. We have buildings and we have businesses. And so that's been a lot of what I've been dedicating my work and the work of my team and the community as a whole to build a Latino marketplace on West 25th. We are a micro nonprofit. We're a really tiny nonprofit, although we do a lot of work. And so how was an organization my size going to take on this huge transformative project? I don't know how I convinced the board, but we did. And so we are getting ready this summer to break ground on the project that's been known as El Mercado. But beyond it being a marketplace for the Latino community, there's so much more that's happening in the space. There'll be a commercial kitchen. I brought on other Latino organizations to be housed here around placemaking and place activation strategy. So Esperanza, who works with Latino youth providing scholarships, English as a second language, ESL, and so forth. GED was the other one I was going to mention. Metro West, our CDC partner, right? And none of the work that we've done without that collaboration with the CDC. When we started, the Latino community was fussing on, we need our own CDC, and our CDC doesn't represent us. And at the time, we did just have a little CDC office. And so as we've been growing, they've been growing too, and we're kind of joined at the hip in that collaboration. And so Metro West CDC agreed to then move into our Mercado as well. So we'll actually be sharing space, the Hispanic Alliance, and we're currently working out a partnership with Metro Health where they'll have a physical presence in our building as well as being a partner on programming. So it's really going to be a magical space in this community. And it's really going to be the catalytic project of the rest of the development that's happening, with Mercado starting, then spurring out. We've called it Mercado for lack of a better name, right, because everybody knows what that is. But again, there's so much more happening in this building that we knew that name didn't do justice. So you guys are the second group that are going to hear this, but the name of the entire facility would be Centro Villa 25. So get excited and get ready for Centro Villa 25. If we break ground at the end of summer and hope to be open next summer. So. I only need $14 million, so I'll pass a basket around in a little bit. I'll take checks, credit cards. We have a square. So yeah, I got you. I take promissory notes. I'm good. So anyhow, El Mercado has created a lot of excitement. The Placita, all of the work that my sister organizations are all doing at the same time to really push our community to really give it what it merits, right? We're not doing anything that's out of this world. We're just providing a dignified way for residents to be able to engage and not feel like that you have to leave. The urban experience, specifically for community of colors, have been, you live in the urban area because it's affordable and there's resources there. But as soon as you get education, as soon as you get some financial mobility, you leave. You go as far from the neighborhood as you can. And that has been the experience for many, many decades. And so now we need to shift that. We need to say you don't need to leave. If you need to go to college, it's fine, but come back. There's work here for you. There's the ability to open a business. There's the ability to raise your family and have quality education. And again, the basic things that everyone should have. And that's really the goal. And we're starting to see that shift. We're starting to see young leaders like me and even younger coming back and making this their work and really being committed to the neighborhood in a way that we haven't seen for decades. And so that is definitely helping in the process. Currently, we have Placita, and then we have this El Mercado that's going to open next summer, right? And so one of the things we also had very clear is I can't open an empty market, right? Where are these business owners going to come from? And obviously, being a small business development center, we see a lot of folks coming into our office that run a home-based business. Maybe they have food business, maybe it's mechanics, maybe service, a lot of different types of businesses. And so where were we going to put them? In Mercado being the solution, but I can't wait 2 years to get them started. So we needed to do some business incubation. By the way, during Placita, while it's a fun festival, there's 20 vendors that participate. Every vendor that's at Placita meets with the business advisor. We talk about, hey, is this a side hustle that you do in the summers? Is this something that you want to turn into a business? What is really your plan so that we could grow and develop them from there? From Placita, we needed an incubator leading into Mercado. We have an issue with space. There's no spaces in this neighborhood, so where am I going to put an incubator? Even in our own office, I would start it there, but we don't, just to say that we have one toilet in our office for everybody, right? So we are tight on space. I'm not making that up. So looking at where this incubator was going to go, on the corner of Seymour and West 25th, there's a little green building. And this little green building has a lot of significance to the Latino community throughout the years. Point of reference to if you don't know how Latinos got to Cleveland, because it's not Miami or it's not anywhere warm. 40s and 50s, Puerto Rican men specifically were recruited to work the steel mills. And so that's why you have in Lorain County and in Cleveland, you have this large density of Latinos. So 80% of the Latino community is Puerto Rican versus Mexican or Central American. We have a ton of others, right? It's a very diverse community, predominantly Puerto Rican. So a gentleman named Ceci Castro and his wife Norma opened a little corner store bodega. Probably now 56 years ago, 52 years when Ceci passed away. So while it was a corner store bodega, trying to address some of the needs that I had expressed, it also became kind of like the community center. They didn't have all of the programs and the things that our community has today. And so Ceci was your payday lender. He was your I need food until payday. He was your rent. He bought a lot of real estate, and a lot of folks lived in his property. And on the weekends, Latino men, I call them the frustrated musicians, will hang out at this bodega, playing music, remembering their island or their place of origin. And it really became a community center. It was a community center for a long time, for decades, and everybody knew. You also got the best avocados and plátanos out of Ceci's store. So when Ceci passed away unexpectedly in 2017, the community was distraught, the family especially. But 4 months later, I went up to them and said, hey, what are you doing with the store? What's the intent? None of the kids really wanted to run a corner store, and honestly, they weren't creating revenue from the store. It was more just open for the community, and that was the family's commitment. So I sold them on this idea on what if we keep the Castro legacy alive of starting businesses, supporting the community by doing a business incubator. And after many tears, every meeting we had, it was very, very emotional. The family agreed to partner with us and to use the store as a business incubator. So currently, if you go to Ceci's store on Seymour in West 25th, you're gonna see las tienditas del mercado. You don't need Spanish class, but I'm gonna push you here a little bit. It's the shops of the market, and so literally businesses that are being incubated to then move into el mercado. Inside of las tienditas, it looks like a coffee shop. It was a shame that a Latino neighborhood did not have a coffee shop. So that was devastating for me specifically. So that was one of the things we knew we needed to bring to it. We need coffee. We need good coffee, not just any coffee. We need really, really good coffee. So we had a coffee shop, Café Social, that started out with us. Café Social has moved into the neighborhood. There are Fulton and Carlisle currently, and Mocina will be opening in the next 2 weeks. So you will have really, really good coffee from Mocina. 2 gentlemen that graduated from St. Ignatius, Pablo, one of the partners, his family has a farm in Honduras called La Sagrada Familia, and so their beans are definitely coming farm to table style. They've been selling their coffee but didn't have a place to actually serve. We recently opened another on called Lara's Sweets, so it's cakes, pastries, all that good stuff. It's all calorie-free, sugar-free. You guys should buy as much as you can. Pura Cepa is a breakfast and lunch spot. Best oatmeal that you will ever find. Puerto Rican oatmeal is kind of like a custard. It's not lumpy, sorry, American oatmeal. So I recommend you try it. It's totally my favorite. But she also does, her goal when she's at Mercado is to be able to provide Puerto Rican food in a way that you would have gotten it served in your grandma's house. Not the trendy stuff that we see, empanadas and the fried stuff. That's all good, but that's not what our grandparents and parents and even some of us grew up eating. And so her goal is to bring that grandma's cooking into the community. Currently, because she's in an incubator, she is serving pressed sandwiches, so Cuban sandwiches. She has all kinds of fancy other sandwiches. The best asopao, which is rice chicken soup. You will also find las tienditas. And then lastly, we have a print and production company there, Ortiz Graphic Designs, husband and wife. These are all family businesses, by the way. Husband and wife, they have an entire print production at their home, have pretty large contracts, but this is their retail space to be able to do. So anything from promo items to doing a wrap on your car to just about anything you could think of, they could do for you. And we just recently also opened La Estrellita. It's been very busy, a specialty grocer, right? So we knew Ceci was a grocer for quick grab items or ethnic appropriate items. So we have a husband and wife that opened up a little grocer space within tienditas. So they're not open today. If not, I would tell you as soon as you get out of here, go. They're observing Good Friday, but they are open Monday through Saturday. So please support Las Tienditas, and that's one of the best ways currently you could engage the neighborhood. So I think I'm getting close here to my wraparound. I encourage all of you to really interact, and even when I was talking earlier to David and Dave, and we were talking about inclusion and the fact that we don't do enough learning, we don't do enough asking. Communities are always really willing to share their story. People are willing to share their story. If you're just asked, if somebody asks you, where did you come from? What are your holidays? What is it that you do? And so take the time to drive around neighborhoods. They're not dangerous. You're not going to get killed. Like all of these stereotypes that are often on neighborhoods. Clark Fulton neighborhood often gets a bad rap on it not being a safe neighborhood, but it's no different than our neighboring neighborhoods. It's no different than Ohio City, it's no different than Tremont, and yet we still go and patron those neighborhoods. So if you have a question, definitely ask. In closing, this is not work that any one person could do alone. Obviously, it takes a village to create a village. So there are a ton of shoulders that I stand on, a ton of colleagues that are right there with me fighting the good fight. A few years ago, we had a Hispanic Heritage event, and one of our leaders spoke and did kind of like a closing event. It was a partnership through PNC. And he was explaining what La Villa would be, his vision of what La Villa would be. And so he gave a story about when he was 5 years old and his grandfather was teaching him how to shave with a straight blade. And he was expressing how dangerous and how scared he was as a 5-year-old to do that, right? Because he knew that he could hurt his grandfather. And his point of the story was that his grandfather told him, it's not about the straight blade, it's about who's holding it and who's consistent with it. And so really, a lot of folks in the community have been holding that straight blade for a long time. And we need allies and champions and other folks that could do this. One of the reasons why I was excited to do this event, because I could see a few familiar faces, but most of them are not familiar faces. And so my ability to stand here and tell you the story of my neighborhood is truly an honor. So thank you for being here on that respect. And I am going to close it with a quote. So we got turned down, we failed, had setbacks, had to start over at times. In anybody's case, that's always the distinguishing factor. The late Nipsey Hussle. Thank you.